If your pride tells a useful lie and a child offers an inconvenient truth, which voice do you follow? Nadia measured a life by edges, crisp sheets, clean lines, cuticles trimmed smooth at the salon, kitchen jars labelled in a tidy hand. Order was the comfort she could afford. 7 months of marriage to Kamran, 1 floor above the corner barber shop he rented, had taught her that love, like hair, grew uneven and needed constant trimming. In the narrow apartment, the only unruly thing was a small person named Layla. Layla collected kindness the way other children collected stickers. She brought home stray button-eyed toys and cats that weren't strays at all, according to angry neighbours. She sang to the cracked teapot on the stove and tied ribbons around the bruised mangoes so they'd heal faster. She kept a small trunk at the foot of her bed, a dented tin thing painted with roses, filled with her mother's things, a blue chiffon dupatta, a wooden hairbrush with a missing tooth, a fountain pen that no longer wrote, and a battered violin with 2 strings left, sleeping in its velvet cradle. Nadia did not touch the trunk. She pretended it was a stool that happened to be in the wrong place. Sometimes when she passed Layla's room, she caught her own reflection in the wardrobe mirror. The new stepmother, 32, clever with scissors, less clever with children. Pride would lean its sleek shoulder against the doorway of her mind and whisper, "You can keep this house perfect. You can be the woman who fixed a broken story." Pride had a voice like the satin ribbon around a pastry, elegant, promising sweetness. Money was the pebble in the shoe of their days. Kamran sent his earnings up the stairs 1 envelope at a time, apologising to the peeling paint. He worked long hours and then longer ones, leaving early and returning late, smelling of hair oil, talk, and the hot metal of razors. He loved Layla in a soft, practical way, and Nadia in a hopeful one. "The shop will turn," he would say. "I'll fix the sign." Then the men from the new apartments will come. But the sign hung crooked on 2 rusting chains, a relic from the previous owner, whose idea of marketing had been to paint a moustache on a crescent moon. Nadia's salon, a single room adjacent to the barber shop, had 3 plastic chairs and a mirror that made everyone look kinder than they felt. She wanted to buy a proper backwash unit, a real sign, a glass jar of wrapped toffees for children who waited while mothers had their eyebrows threaded. She wanted to feel like the kind of woman who had a place in the neighbourhood, and not like a guest who kept wiping her hands on her dress. The last week of August, a heat wave boxed the city like a glass lid on a steaming pot. At noon, Nadia returned from the salon, cheeks flushed, feet aching, thinking of cold, thick yogurt and a nap. Inside, the fan wobbled, chopping the heat into slow layers. The trunk sat open like a mouth. Layla stood on her bed, pretending to conduct an invisible orchestra, the violin under her chin, bow in the air like a question mark. The blue dupatta draped her small shoulders, and the wooden brush acted as a microphone for announcements. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to present Mama's music." Then she laughed, the exact laugh that lived on the only recording they had of her mother, a voice note Kamran kept on his old phone. A lo-fi file of a woman singing a lullaby and losing herself in her own giggles. "Layla," Nadia said, steadying her voice, "put everything back." Gently Layla froze, dupatta sliding. "I was careful." "I promise," her eyes, enormous in the hot afternoon, pleaded in basic language. "Let my mother be alive in objects, if she cannot be alive in breath." Pride slipped into Nadia's ear. "It's time to be the lady of the house. If you let this continue, the child will always live in yesterday, and you will always be the intruder." Nadia exhaled. The fan made the dupatta flutter like a tired bird. She saw, suddenly and with discomfort, that the trunk was more than a container. It was a shrine built at ground level. It was a room where she did not belong. That night, after the dinner dishes, Kamran rubbed his temples and admitted again that rent loomed like a cloud. 2 months, he said. We are okay, and then we are not. But I'll take on late clients. There's a wedding season coming. I could sell the old dryer, Nadia offered. The one that works? He smiled tiredly. No, keep your tools. Your hands are how we move forward. Pride spread a soft napkin across Nadia's thoughts. Forward requires letting go. In the morning, while Layla visited the neighbour's courtyard cat and Kamran had gone to the shop, Nadia carried the trunk to the salon. Sweat gathered under her scarf. She told herself it was a practical decision. She would sell what she could. She would keep one thing for Layla, perhaps the dupatta, unless keeping it meant keeping the shrine. She hadn't planned the speech she would give. Later, that they were a new family, that the house shouldn't be a museum, that they would honour the dead with stories, not stuff. She left the salon's door propped open and set the trunk on the chair by the mirror. The violin gleamed faintly, more memory than instrument. The brush winked like a bad tooth. Pride adjusted its cufflinks. You are courageous at last. Then a shadow fell across the threshold. Layla stood there, hair damp from running, breath hitching. Her gaze moved to the trunk, to the violin, to Nadia's hand. Ami, she said automatically, then corrected. Nadia, please. Please don't, the fan murmured. The street outside had its own conversation. Vendors, horns, sandals slapping the pavement. Nadia felt the room tighten. The speech she imagined evaporated. The child's plea hung between them like a string stretched too taut. Layla, Nadia began. We need, please, Layla whispered, stepping close. Her palm landed preposterously small on the violin case. I'll be careful. I'll tidy more. Just don't sell her. Pride, bored of nuance, rolled its eyes. Are you a mother or a maid to this child's grief? Nadia reached for the case. Layla's fingers clung. The plastic chair creaked. The blue dupatta, folded beneath the violin, slid free and puddled on the floor like sky. Stop! Layla cried. Please stop! Her voice cracked on. Stop! And in that crack, someone else's footsteps ran up the building stairs 2 at a time, and the door frame filled with a third pair of eyes that knew both of them. Layla! Nadia! Kamran said from the doorway, chest heaving, barber's apron slung across one shoulder like a sash. What's happening here? And this is where every story can pivot. Kamran's gaze fell immediately to the violin, to Layla's trembling mouth, to the blue dupatta on the floor. He set down the apron and wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. Outside, a bicycle bell rang, insistent and small. Nadia felt the scene lock into place like teeth in a zipper. She hardened against her own uncertainty. If she softened now, she told herself, the house would drown in the past. We're having a conversation, she said. We're deciding what to keep and what to let go. Layla stood with her shoulders raised, a small animal braced for weather. She wants to sell Mama, she told her father. She wants to sell the music. Kamran swallowed. Nadia saw the memory flicker across his face. His first wife's fingers on that violin, the way she played off-key lullabies and laughed at herself, the violin sleeping for years now, gathering the dust of language unspoken. Pride placed a hand over Nadia's heart. Stand straight. If you bend now, you will bend forever. The rent, Nadia said carefully. The sign. We'll find another way, Kamran said at once, and the speed of it stung her like a slap. He sounded like a man who had been waiting to say exactly that and feared he'd never get the chance. There is not always another way, Nadia answered. Sometimes there is only this way, the hard way, where adults make decisions and children learn that things are not people. The violin is a person, Layla said. She's Mama's breath. Nadia shut her eyes. When she opened them, Kamran was already kneeling to gather the dupatta, smoothing it like a passport. He looked up at Nadia with a plea she recognised. He wanted her to be the generous one. He wanted no argument here, not in the doorway of the salon, not with customers walking by, not with their newly knitted family still fragile. "Let's pause," he said, his voice measured. "We're hot. We're tired. We'll talk tonight." That night arrived like a guest who is already late and knows it. Layla refused to eat and fell asleep in a fortress of pillows, a small sentry with tear-sticky hair. Kamran sat with Nadia at the table and laced his fingers. "I know what you're trying to do," he said. "You're trying to build us a new world." "Yes," she replied, relieved to be seen. "One that fits. One where we do not live by debts to memories." He reached for her hand. "But the past is not a debt," he said quietly. "It's a root. If you cut it clean to plant a new tree, that tree may not stand." Nadia's back stiffened. "Are you asking me to live in a room with another woman's perfume until it evaporates?" "I'm asking you to live with the child who carries it," he answered, "until her perfume becomes yours too." They slept facing opposite walls. Pride curled at Nadia's feet like a cat, satisfied. You held your ground. In the morning, a practical universe returned. Hair to cut, shoes to tie, eggs to scramble. Nadia carried the trunk back to Layla's room and set it gently at the foot of the bed. She told herself this was a pause, not surrender. She told herself she would sell other things, but something sour had settled in the house. Layla's laughter did not return that day or the next, and Nadia's salon had a slow week of headshakes. "Next time, Bobby." Money's tight. The corner where the backwash unit might have stood became a place she avoided looking at. On Thursday, an old man came into the salon while Nadia was rethreading a spool for eyebrow work. He wore a jacket too big for the weather and a fedora that belonged to a year when jazz had wandered through the city and never left completely. He leaned his cane against the mirror and took off the hat with a small flourish. His face was creased in the precise places where smiling used to live. "Do you fix things?" he asked. Nadia looked up. "Faces," she offered, trying for lightness. "I can make them neat." He chuckled. "Neat is overrated. I meant..." He turned and tapped the violin case with his cane. "That. It isn't for sale," Nadia said, before she realised the certainty in her voice. "I didn't ask to buy it," he replied. "I asked if you fix things." Nadia hesitated. "No," she admitted. "Not that." He nodded as if she'd said something wise. "I am Yusuf," he said. "I fix watches. Time gets tired. It trips over its own feet. I make it walk again." He tilted his head. "I can guide you to a man who wakes sleeping violins." "Why?" Nadia asked. "Why help me?" Yusuf adjusted his hat. "I owe your husband a favour. Years ago he fixed my sign for free. He said a shop without a name is a whisper. Also, I heard a child teach the air how to beg, and I am an old man who cannot resist lessons." Pride stirred, annoyed at this intrusion. "You don't need oracles, Nadia. You need a sign and customers with cash." But Nadia's fingers, of their own traitorous accord, reached for the case. And what would it cost? "Not money," Yusuf said. "A promise." "I'm married," Nadia said, bristling. He laughed, a wheeze with joy in it. "Not that kind of promise. This. If the violin sings again, you will listen, even when your own chorus is louder." The room tilted, just a little. Nadia thought of Layla turning the bow into an exclamation point. She thought of Kamran's tired eyes when he said root. She thought of her own mother, who had been stern properness wrapped around a warm core, and who had once told her, "Some noises are not mess. Some noises are prayer." "Where is this man?" she asked. Yusuf tapped the counter. "Down the alley by the spice shop. Name is Rafik. He wears magnifying glasses like a fly. He will bring back a song, if there is still a song to bring." Nadia flinched at the thought of the price if there wasn't. "I have to work," she said. "Bring it at closing," Yusuf said. "Time is a stubborn patient." It waits that evening. Nadia slipped the violin into a cloth bag and told Kamran she was going to buy lentils. She told herself this was a test of noise, not a surrender to mess. The spice alley smelled of cardamom and cumin and the sort of burnt sugar that isn't food but memory. A bell chimed when she entered Rafiq's shop. Rafiq peered over his ridiculous glasses, which magnified his eyes to comic sincerity. "A child's violin," he said, taking it gently. "Or a child's mother's violin? Those are different, but they both hold fingerprints. It hasn't sung in years," Nadia said. "Ah," Rafiq replied, as if she'd confessed an affair. "Then it is like a well that needs the first bucket. A little oil, new strings, a patient ear. How much?" she asked. "For money?" He shrugged. "Your husband cuts my hair. He will charge me later. For you, I ask only one story about the first time you felt kind." Nadia blinked. "Why?" Rafiq smiled. "Because instruments need to be restored with kindness. It seeps into the wood. You cannot fill a violin with anger and expect it to sing lullabies." Nadia's cheeks warmed. She tried to remember a pure kindness unadorned by apology or ambition. "When I was 11, she said slowly, "a girl at school tore her dress. Everyone laughed. I pretended to faint so the teacher would send for water, and the girl could leave unmocked. She'd never told anyone this. She'd forgotten it herself until the shape of it reappeared. Like a coin at the bottom of a jar." Rafiq nodded, satisfied. "Good." Come tomorrow, Nadia walked home differently, as if the street had set a slightly new angle under her feet. Pride trotted alongside, impatient. "This is all drama. We need a sign, woman." Saturday dawned with a pink soap sky. Kamran kissed Nadia's forehead and left early. Lila, still tender around her trunk, stuck close to the apartment, ferrying crumbs to the courtyard sparrows. Nadia opened the salon and received exactly 3 customers, 1 for waxing, 2 for gossip, and then closed early, heart knotted. Rafiq presented the violin like a doctor returning a baby. He tightened the pegs and drew the bow across the strings. The sound was not pretty and not ugly, the way a throat sounds before the first words of apology. "It will need practice," he said. "It remembers being touched." "How much do I owe?" Nadia asked. He waved her off. "Go home. Knock gently on a door inside yourself. See if anyone answers." When she entered the apartment, Layla was sitting cross-legged on the cool floor, colouring a picture of a house with windows open to let the sky in. She looked up, cautious as a deer. Nadia knelt and set the case between them. Layla stared, mouth opening and closing. "I thought—" She couldn't finish it. She didn't know whether to whisper thank you or why. "I was wrong," Nadia said simply, the words a thread she had to pull. "I tried to build us a life by closing doors. That is not how wind moves. Your mother's things are not more powerful than your mother's love." "But they are not nothing." Layla's eyes filled. She reached but hesitated, as if the violin might vanish. "Here," Nadia said, helping her lift it. "We'll learn together how to hold this without breaking." Layla rested the violin under her chin, like a memory returning to its home. She drew the bow and made a single note that would not have paid for a single egg, but both of them felt something loosen in the room. Pride, caught off guard, tisked and retreated to a high shelf. That night, Kamran came home to a different air. The apartment smelled of frying onions and humility. On the table lay the blue dupatta, not as a flag but as a tablecloth. "What's this?" he asked, smiling despite the day. "A truce," Nadia said, "and an invitation." The days that followed were not miraculous. The rent remained unimpressed by music. The corner by the mirror in Nadia's salon began to fill, not with a backwash unit, but with women who brought their daughters, little girls perched on the spare chair, watching Nadia braid hair and fix stray strands, with a tenderness that looked practiced. The violin sometimes came down to the salon between clients. Layla would pluck a melody that sounded suspiciously like the cartoon jingle from morning television. Women laughed, and then they stopped laughing and simply listened, because the notes were walking somewhere and they were curious where. Yusuf returned a week later with his watch accidentally stuck at 11:11. He left, still smiling, exactly 11 minutes after the violin made him cry. He came back the next day with his sister and his sister's friend, who needed her hair fixed for her son's engagement. Word of mouth began to work the way a well does. Nadia placed a tiny jar of toffees by the mirror. She labelled nothing on purpose. Pride sulked but did not entirely leave. Sometimes, when the salon was busy and a customer was rude, when an auntie sniffed and asked, "Do you know how to do it like she did?" Meaning the first wife, Pride stepped forward wearing Nadia's voice. "We are not a museum." Nadia would catch herself mid-sentence and reboot. "We do things the way this family does things now," she would say instead, "and we keep what is good from before." One evening, a storm fell on the city as if a giant had shaken a rug. Rain hammered the crooked sign above the barber shop until one of the rusting chains snapped. The sign hung by a single metal arm, listing over the sidewalk like a broken elbow. Kamran climbed the ladder with a rope, face set to stubborn. A shout rose from below, neighbours concerned, and then a sudden gust yanked the sign free. It dropped a heavy moon toward the alley where Layla was chasing the neighbour's kitten. Nadia saw it first and ran, hair unpinned, feet flying. She threw herself over Layla without calculation, and the sign hit the ground and shivered itself to splinters inches from her hand. There was a chorus of shouts, a scattering of prayers. Kamran was on the ground almost before fear arrived, hands on both of them, face breaking and mending in quick succession. The kitten fled into the storm. The sign was a ruin. The shop had no name. The next morning, people brought tea, unasked. Someone's cousin brought a spare ladder. Yusuf arrived with a roll of paper and a charcoal pencil. "I am no artist," he announced, "but I know how to lay letters like tracks." "What will we write?" Kamran asked, half laughing, half broken. "Your name," Nadia said, a certainty blooming. "Not a moustache on the moon. Your name, clean, and below it, mine. And perhaps—" She looked at Layla, who stood solemnly, violin case in hand. "Perhaps a small treble clef." "So people will expect music." The new sign was not expensive, but it was honest. It hung on 2 strong chains. It said, in good paint, "Kamran and Nadia." Kutis, threading. Tunes on rainy days. It was ridiculous and perfect. People stopped to smile. Some came in because they wanted to see whether there really were tunes on rainy days. On rainy days, there were. A month later, a message came from the local community centre. They were organising a small performance for the festival. Would Layla, and perhaps any other children she knew, play something? The thought made Layla both glow and shrink. Nadia knelt and told her about fainting at 11 to save a girl from laughter. "Kindness is a stage too," she said. "It needs a rehearsal." They rehearsed after dinner, badly, and then less badly. Nadia laughed for the right reasons this time. She learned to hold the bow. She learned that she could be wrong and still belong. She learned that when Layla forgot a note and looked around, she wanted to meet Nadia's eyes first. She learned how to be those eyes. Pride visited less. When it did, it wore a different suit. It was proud of Layla's new callus. It was proud of Kamran's straight new sign. It was proud of Nadia's jar of toffees, which was always emptier than she remembered, and always filled again somehow. Then one late afternoon, just before the festival, the twist arrived the way Karma prefers. Quietly first, then very loud, a woman came in with a boy of about 9. Her bangles were the expensive kind that make other women count. She sat and said, in a voice that expected to be obeyed, "Cut it short." "I don't want him looking silly with that long hair at the performance." The boy held himself stiff. His eyes slid to the violin case in the corner. "I need it long for the role," he murmured. "I'm playing Krishna." The mother waved a dismissive hand. "Krishna can wear a wig," she said. "I am not negotiating." Nadia felt pride stir, surprised by recognition. Here it was, the neatness that prized the eye of the beholder over the heart of the wearer. The mother's voice braided itself with one Nadia had used on a smaller voice a month ago. "We are adults, we decide, childhood will learn." She looked at the boy, at the outline of his resistance. She looked at the mother whose face said, "I pay, you obey." She looked at Layla, who was listening, not playing, violin on her lap like a sunflower. "May I ask a question?" Nadia said softly to the mother. The woman arched an eyebrow. "Is your wish about the boy?" Nadia asked. "Or about what people will say about you?" A flush rose, quick and unbeautiful. "Do your job," the woman snapped. Nadia swallowed. She could do the cut and earn the cash, or she could refuse and risk the review that would snake through the neighbourhood in half an hour. The new woman is insolent. She thinks she knows better. Pride stood at a fork. It pointed left. Protect your business. Obey. It pointed right. Protect the child. Resist. It did not know which path led to a cleaner mirror. "Forgive me," Nadia said gently. "I cannot cut his hair against his voice. I can trim it so it looks neat and still suits the role. After the performance, if he agrees, I'll cut it short for free." But not today, silence. Then the mother stood, bracelets jangling like small alarms. "You will regret this," she hissed, gathering her purse. "People do not like impertinence." She left. The boy looked at Nadia as if someone had opened a window in his lungs. "Thank you," he said, voice very small but very clear. That evening a message soared through the neighbourhood faster than a rumour. The rich woman was furious, and she bought her displeasure wholesale. 3 clients cancelled. Cameron's jaw tightened at the numbers he scribbled in the ledger. Nadia lay awake and listened to the fan trouble the hot air. The next morning, the local WhatsApp group buzzed like an angry beehive, then like a grateful one. Someone posted, "I saw what Nadia did. She is right." And then someone else added a picture. Nadia crouched to tie a ribbon in a girl's hair after threading her mother's brows, expression tender as a midwife. And then someone wrote, "We need more people who will tell us the truth we don't want to hear but should." By noon, they had 5 new appointments. By evening, the rich woman's sister came in and said, "Trim only." "Don't tell my sister I was here." They laughed, and then they did not, and then they returned to laughing. At the festival, under strings of coloured lights, children performed with the solemnity of tiny saints. Layla's turn came. She stepped forward, violin shaking slightly, bow a fragile flag. She played a tune Nadia recognised too late as the lullaby from the old recording, made whole by 2 new strings and a new mother listening with her skin. The notes were not perfect. They were honest. A hush fell and held. At the final trembling note, someone in the back clapped first too loud, and then everyone did, and then the applause found a rhythm that felt like rain when you want rain. Layla's face, oh, her face, was so alight that even pride bowed. When they returned home, the building staircase smelled like wet dust and good news. On their doorstep sat a wrapped parcel with a note. "For the girl who tunes rainy days." Our inside lay a set of new strings, a polishing cloth, a book titled First Pieces for the Patient Parent, and a paintbrush, fine as a whisper. That man is a magician, Kamran said, smiling, and Nadia said, he is a teacher. And Layla, already asleep against Nadia's shoulder, breathed a small sound that could have been agreement or the first word of a dream. Days spun, ordinary and hopeful. The crooked sign did not return. The strong one did not fall. The salon's mirror reflected haircuts and soft revolutions. Layla practiced. Kamran raised prices in tiny increments and said sorry each time. Nadia learned that order was good, but order that choked was not. And then the universe, which likes symmetry, wrapped the story it had begun. One late afternoon, as the sun moved lower than the wires and lit them like staff lines on a sheet of music, a familiar clatter came from the stairs. Footsteps fast, breathless. The doorway filled with Kamran, eyes bright, apron ruched as a sash, exactly as on that day of the trunk. He took in the scene at a glance. Nadia at the mirror with a client, Layla in the spare chair practicing a tune, the violin case open like a well, the blue dupatta now tied as a curtain tie-back, the jar of toffees empty again. His mouth opened to speak, but Layla beat him to it. She set down the violin and ran. Abu! She cried, and then laughing added, Wait, I have to finish this bar. Finish, he said, grinning foolishly. Then he looked at Nadia over Layla's head, and in that look was every apology he didn't need to give, and every gratitude he wanted to. I have news, he said, when the customer had gone, and the door chime shut. He set an envelope on the counter. The landlord came. He saw the sign. He heard about the rainy day music. He said he was raising our rent. Nadia's heart plummeted. In 3 months. But he's giving us a break for the next 2 to encourage art. I think his mother played sitar. Nadia laughed, part disbelief, part relief she'd earned. Pride spun in place, unsure whether to claim credit. Gratitude took its hand and led it to a seat. Also, Kamran added, eyes gentler, Yusuf's nephew wants to paint a mural on our shutters. Children playing music under a barber's pole. He says it will make the street friendlier at night. And, Nadia prompted, reading the unspoken line on his face. He looked at Layla, who was now cleaning rosin off the bough with concentration like prayer. And I am proud, he said, of my wife, of my daughter, of the noise we allow. The apartment a month ago ready to splinter at the touch of a small hand held the scene without complaint. A jar of toffees stood empty, waiting to be filled. The violin case waited to be closed. The dupatta held the light. Not every story of stepmother and stepchild ends with music. Some end with silence, some with a brittle peace, some never find their way out of the first tense room. Nadia learned this not from books, but from the way neighbours' voices changed when they asked, How is she with you? And meant both of them. Nadia also learned that the antagonist in her life did not wear a wicked face. Greed did not stalk her. Envy was a little dog that barked at some doors and slept at others. Pride had worn her shoes, had borrowed her voice, had mislaid her softer instincts and replaced them with instructions. Pride had dressed like responsibility and called itself necessary. It was personified not as a villain in a cape, but as a manager with a clipboard, efficient, effective, slightly afraid. The wise teacher did not arrive with a wand. Yusuf arrived with a broken watch and the gift of naming. A shop without a name is a whisper. Rafiq arrived with magnifying glasses and the audacity to ask for a story as currency. Layla arrived every day, 9 years old for a very long time, and showed Nadia that a child is not an argument to be won, but a language to be learned. The calmer style reversal came disguised, as it tends to. When Nadia reached for the violin to sell, she believed she was trading nostalgia for rent, memory for survival. She was prepared to be called cruel. She was certain the exchange would purchase tomorrow. Instead, it nearly bought her a house made entirely of no laughter, no trust, no music. When she refused the rich woman's demand, she risked the tidy ledger that pride worshipped. She expected punishment. She received allegiance, the kind that doesn't write itself in ink but in shared looks, and returned smiles and people who come back with their sisters. Punishment did arrive too, for the selfishness of that first grasp, though not as lightning from the heavens, and not as a neighbour's gossip. It arrived as a cracked voice in a salon on a hot day. Please stop. It arrived as Cameron standing in a doorway and recognising, in a blink, which way the family weather would turn. It arrived as a crooked sign that fell where a child would have stood if Nadia had not learned to run toward noise rather than away from it. Kindness, when it came, brought rewards that were ordinary and immense. A straight sign, a jar of toffees that never stayed full but never stayed empty. A network of women who told one another she listens. A small, brave performance under festival lights. A mural of music on a shutter. A landlord who raised rent but gave them a grace period because he could hear a sitar from his mother in Layla's timid notes. A husband who arrived breathless in a doorway and found not a battle over a trunk, but two people who had made room for a third. On a cool morning in late November, Nadia woke to a quiet house. She reached for her robe and found the blue dupatta instead. She wore it around her shoulders and made tea, moving softly, not out of fear of waking anyone, but out of respect for the early hour. The window showed a city that had not yet decided what day it would be. She thought of herself before, her insistence on edges, her belief that motherhood was a set of rules you laminated and posted on the fridge. She thought of the first time she held the violin case properly, not as a pawn ticket, but as a sleeping thing you lift with both arms. Layla padded in, hair a haystack, eyes milked with sleep. "You're wearing, Mama," she murmured, smiling in a way that did not slice. Nadia opened her arms. Layla came willingly into the circle that widened to fit them. "I'm wearing ours," Nadia said. "If you want to pretend it's a cape, I will play along." They ate toast with jam and got red on their chins. Cameron came in later from the shop with flour on his moustache. Having helped the baker carry sacks, he kissed them both, the way men who know the shape of their luck do. Then he reached for the violin and plucked a note as a joke. The note was not quite miserable. They all laughed. In the salon the day brought customers with complicated requests and ordinary faces. A teenager, eyes ringed with sleeplessness, asked if Nadia could cut her hair, like starting over. A grandmother asked for a braid that said, "I was beautiful before, and I am beautiful now, but differently." An uncle came to ask if they would cut his toddler's hair for the first time, and whether there was a ritual for that. Nadia said, "Our only ritual is listening," and he seemed strangely relieved. And then the door chimed, and the rich woman returned carrying a tray of sweets. Nadia and Kamran exchanged a glance that said, quietly, "Hold steady." The woman's bracelets were muted today. She placed the tray on the counter, as if delivering a confession. "My son played Krishna without a wig," she said. "He insisted. He said his hair was part of the story. He played well. People clapped." I was proud. I was also embarrassed that I had cared more about people's eyes than his joy. She swallowed something sharp. "You told me a truth I didn't want. That is expensive. This is all I can afford in return." Nadia felt pride attempt a victory lap, and then sit down politely. "Thank you," she said simply, "for coming back." The woman squared her shoulders. "Also," she added briskly, looking around, "you could use better lighting. I know someone who can help. I'll send him." When she left, Layla popped a sweet into her mouth and said, through coconut flakes, "Karma is a lady with matching bangles." Nadia laughed. "Perhaps," she said, "or perhaps karma is a shop sign that doesn't fall." That evening after dinner, Layla took out the violin and placed it in Nadia's hands. "Your turn," she said, with the sovereign power of the young. Nadia held it awkwardly, Chin finding a home that felt less foreign than last month. She drew the bow. A sound came, not beautiful, not ugly, right on the threshold. She tried again. The note improved as notes do when they are met halfway. Good, Layla said, imitating Rafiq's seriousness. Patience, Cameron murmured, imitating the universes. Nadia played the lullaby's first bar. She thought of the recording on Cameron's old phone, a woman she had never met laughing a future into being. She bowed into that memory without fear that it would push her out of the room. The apartment received the sound like rain after a dry month. In the mirror, Nadia caught her own eyes. She looked like herself, not like a replacement or like a lesson someone had given up on. She looked like a woman who could hold two truths at once. That order is kindness when it makes room, and cruelty when it shuts the door. The next morning, when the world woke up cranky and then decided to be generous, Nadia wrote in small letters on a sticky note and stuck it behind the salon mirror where only she could see. Do not sell the music for the sign. Make the music that becomes the sign. The note curled at the edges in the heat and then flattened in the cool. It survived sweeping, laughter, tears, the seasons of hair and mood and money. Months later, when the shop next door closed and the landlord asked if they wanted to expand, Nadia and Cameron did not look first at each other. They looked at Layla. She had grown an inch. She had grown a bit braver. She nodded, sober and thrilled, the way you do when a stage is being built under your feet and the audience is already seated. They said yes. They knocked down the wall between barber and salon, and in its place they painted a mural of a treble clef braided into a barber pole. They hung the blue dupatta, now gently faded, as a curtain at the window between rooms, a veil between last year and this one, not to hide but to soften. On opening day, Yusuf cut a ribbon slowly, because time likes to take its time. Rafiq played a small tune on a harmonium he brought, uninvited. The rich woman came with her son, hair now short and handsome, to hold the balloon string at the door. The neighbours came with stories, and in the crowd a child began to cry, overwhelmed and small. Nadia left the chair, kneeled, and offered a toffee from a new jar. It's okay to be loud, she told the child. We like noise here. Later, when the shop was quiet and the shutter was down, the mural catching the last light, Nadia took Layla's hand. I almost made a hard mistake, she said. I almost sold the music. You didn't, Layla replied, with the merciful bluntness of the young. You bought it. Nadia smiled and decided to keep that phrasing. She had bought the music with humility, with the price of an apology, with the interest of listening. Pride, tamed but not dead, sat on the counter. It no longer whispered orders. Sometimes it purred. Do not trade music for a sign. Make music that becomes your sign. Today, pick one sign you're chasing. Status, neatness, approval, and ask, am I selling my quiet music to buy this? If yes, make one small change that honors the music instead. Then tell someone you trust what you chose, so your courage echoes.